Welcome, weary travellers. My name is Oliver, and tonight we're diving into one of history's most over-romanticised topics, sex, medieval style. Now, if you're picturing candlelit chambers, silk sheets, and breathless poetry, you're about 1,000 miles off and about 6 centuries too early. Because in medieval Europe, sex wasn't about passion, it was about survival, about alliances, dowries, inheritance, and the uncomfortable business of producing heirs before the winter frost set in. Love might have been nice if it happened, but nobody counted on it. Privacy, that was for monks and the dead. Consent, complicated at best. And hygiene, well, let's just say no one was lighting incense for the atmosphere. Still, this was daily life, as ordinary as mending your shoes or paying your taxes. And tonight, we'll drift gently through the quiet, unpolished truth of it, the side of medieval life that history usually leaves in the margins. So before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing our sleepy little global village gather quietly in the comment section, halfway between history and dreamland. Now, please, settle into your most comfortable position, adjust your pillows, pull up your blanket, and feel the weight of the day begin to fade. Let the modern world slip away as we journey back to a time when dating meant checking someone's teeth and romance involved their father counting your chickens. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1348. The pale morning light is seeping through a sheet of oiled parchment stretched across your window. The straw mattress beneath you is scratchy and cold. Your breath clouds softly in the air, mixing with the scent of damp wool and last night's ashes. Today is the day you're expected to ask Robert the Miller for his daughter's hand in marriage. You're 23 years old. You own 3 chickens, a set of worn carpenter's tools, and a cottage that only leaks when it rains. You've spoken to Agnes exactly 6 times, and none of those conversations lasted long enough to count. And there's no way out, but let's take a breath and see how you got yourself into this situation in the first place. Chapter 1. The arrangement. The scent of sawdust and morning frost fills your nostrils as you sit on the edge of your straw mattress, trying to summon the courage for what lies ahead. Your cottage feels smaller this morning, the rough timber walls pressing in like a confession booth. Outside, you can hear the village stirring to life, the creak of cart wheels on frozen earth, the distant lowing of cattle, the sharp crack of splitting kindling. Your father, Willem, had approached you 3 weeks ago with the gravity usually reserved for discussions about crop failures or the Lord's tax increases. The fire had burned low in the hearth, casting long shadows across the earthen floor as he set down his wooden spoon and fixed you with that look, the one that meant your bachelor days were numbered. "It's time, boy," he'd said, not looking up from the wooden bowl he was carving by the dying firelight. His knife moved with practiced precision, each curl of wood falling like a small decision. "You're 23. You've got a trade, a cottage that doesn't leak too badly, and enough saved to support a wife." The word wife had hung in the smoky air like an accusation. Not because you didn't want one. The lonely winter nights in your single-room cottage had grown increasingly cold and quiet, but because the whole process felt as foreign as the Latin prayers. Father Benedict mumbled during Sunday Mass. You'd known this conversation was coming. In your world, marriage isn't a matter of if, but when. Men who remain unmarried past 25 become objects of suspicion and gossip? Are they too poor, too strange, too fond of their own company in ways that make the church nervous? Better to settle the matter before the village starts wondering. Robert the miller has a daughter, your father had continued, his knife pausing mid-stroke. Agnes. She's 19, healthy, knows her way around a kitchen. Her father's looking for a match. Agnes, you'd seen her at market days, of course. Her brown hair tucked beneath a simple linen coif. Her hands always busy, sorting grain, mending cloth, helping her mother with the endless tasks that keep a household running. She had a quiet way about her, speaking softly to customers, laughing politely at the merchants' jokes without encouraging too much familiarity. She seemed competent, kind even, but she was essentially a stranger. Your father had reached into the wooden chest beside his chair and withdrawn a small leather pouch. The coins inside clinked softly as he set it on the table between you. Her dowry won't be much. A few silver pieces, some household goods, maybe a pig, if we're fortunate. But Robert's got steady work and his family's well regarded. The negotiations, you learned, had been ongoing for weeks. Your father and Robert had discussed terms over ale at the tavern, weighing your prospects as a carpenter against Agnes's skills as a housewife. They'd examined each other's holdings, like merchants evaluating grain. How much land, how many animals, what debts were owed, and to whom. You hadn't been consulted because your opinion, while not entirely irrelevant, was secondary to the practical considerations. Could you support a wife? Did you have trade skills that would provide steady income? Were you known to be temperate, honest, unlikely to drink away the household money or beat your spouse senseless? Apparently, you'd passed the evaluation. Now, 3 weeks later, you're expected to make the formal request, not for Agnes's hand, that decision rests with her father, but for the privilege of courting her with marriage as the understood goal. If Robert agrees, you'll be granted supervised visits, chaperoned walks, carefully monitored conversations designed to determine if you're compatible enough to share a life, a bed, and the countless small intimacies that marriage entails. The thought makes your stomach clench with something between anticipation and terror. You rise from your bed and splash cold water from the wooden basin onto your face, the shock of it driving away the last wisps of sleep. Your reflection in the polished metal mirror shows a man who looks older than his years. Brown hair, already showing threads of grey at the temples, hands permanently stained with wood resin, a thin scar along your jaw from a chisel that slipped 2 summers ago. Not handsome, perhaps, but solid, reliable, the kind of man who won't disappear in the night or spend the household money on dice and questionable women. You dress carefully in your best tunic, the brown wool one your mother wove before she died, soft with age and wear, but still respectable. Over it goes your leather jerkin, and around your waist, the belt your father gave you when you finished your apprenticeship. The clothes feel formal, heavy with purpose. Outside, the village is coming alive in the grey pre-dawn light. Smoke rises from a dozen chimneys, and you can smell the familiar cocktail of wood fires, livestock, and the earthy scent of freshly turned soil. Your breath mists in the cold air as you make your way through the narrow lanes, your wooden shoes crunching softly on frost-hardened earth. The miller's house sits beside the stream that powers his grinding wheel, a sturdy 2-story structure built of stone and timber. Even at this early hour, you can hear the steady thrum of the water wheel, a sound that's been the heartbeat of the village for as long as anyone can remember. You pause at the wooden gate, your hand resting on the latch. Through the small windows, you can see the warm glow of candles and the movement of figures beginning their daily routine. Somewhere inside, Agnes is probably helping her mother prepare the morning meal, her hands busy with tasks she's performed thousands of times. By evening, if all goes well, those same hands might be promised to you. The thought sends a strange shiver through your chest. Part excitement, part responsibility, part fear. Marriage will change everything. No more solitary meals eaten in silence. No more decisions made without consultation. No more long winter evenings with only your own thoughts for company. Instead, there will be another person sharing your space, your bed, your daily rhythms, someone whose moods and needs and preferences will become as important as your own, someone who will see you at your worst, tired, frustrated, struggling with the small failures that accumulate in any life, and who will depend on you for protection, provision, and the thousand small kindnesses that make marriage bearable. It's a sobering thought, but as you lift the latch and step into the miller's yard, you remind yourself that this is how it's always been done. Your parents were strangers when they married, and they built a life together that lasted 23 years, until fever took your mother last spring. Your neighbours, your friends, the couples you see walking to church on Sunday mornings, most of them began as practical arrangements that slowly, carefully grew into something warmer. Perhaps that's enough. Perhaps love is something that grows in the spaces between shared meals and common struggles, in the quiet moments when two people choose to be gentle with each other, despite having every reason not to be. Perhaps it's something you learn rather than something that strikes you like lightning. The front door opens before you can knock, and Robert himself appears, his greying beard neatly combed, his expression carefully neutral. He's a big man, made bigger by the years of lifting grain sacks, but his eyes are kind. "Young Willem," he says, "though you haven't been young Willem for years now. Come in, we've been expecting you." You follow him into the warm interior of the house, where the smell of baking bread mingles with the scent of herbs hanging from the rafters. Agnes is there, helping her mother tend a pot over the fire, and when she looks up at your entrance, her cheeks colour slightly pink. "Father," she says quietly, "shall I bring ale for our guest?" "Aye," Robert nods, settling himself in the carved wooden chair that marks his place as head of the household. "I think that would be appropriate." And so it begins, the careful dance of courtship in a world where privacy is scarce and every word is weighed for its implications. As Agnes moves quietly around the room, preparing refreshment with practiced grace, you find yourself watching the way candlelight catches in her hair, the efficient movement of her hands, the way she keeps her eyes modestly lowered but occasionally steals glances in your direction. She's pretty, you realise, not in the dramatic way of the noble ladies in minstrel songs, but in the quiet, sustainable way of someone whose beauty lies in competence and kindness rather than decoration. When she hands you the wooden cup of ale, your fingers brush hers for just a moment, and you're surprised by the warmth of her skin, the slight tremor that suggests she's as nervous as you are. "Thank you," you murmur, and she nods, stepping back to stand beside her mother's chair. Robert clears his throat, and the real conversation begins. "I understand you've given some thought to marriage," he says, his tone carefully neutral. "I have," you reply, grateful that your voice sounds steadier than you feel. I believe I'm ready to take on the responsibilities of a household. It's a formal exchange, each phrase carefully chosen to convey respect and serious intent. You're not declaring passionate love. That would be inappropriate and suspicious. Instead, you're demonstrating that you understand what marriage means. A partnership built on mutual obligation, shared work, and the quiet devotion that keeps a household functioning through good times and bad. Over the next hour, Robert asks about your trade, your prospects, your plans for supporting a family. You answer honestly, describing the commissions you've secured for the coming season, the small plot of land you've been able to purchase, your hopes of expanding your workshop if business continues to grow. Agnes says little, but you're aware of her presence throughout the conversation. The way she occasionally nods at something you've said, the careful attention with which she listens, the thoughtful expression that suggests she's evaluating you as carefully as her father is. Finally, Robert leans back in his chair and exchanges a look with his wife. Some silent communication passes between them, and he nods slowly. I believe an arrangement might be possible, he says, with proper courtship, of course, chaperoned visits, time for you both to become better acquainted. Your heart gives a peculiar jump, and when you glance at Agnes, you see the faintest smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. I would be honoured, you say, and mean it. As you walk home through the gradually brightening village, your mind is already racing ahead to the challenges that await. Courtship in your world is a delicate balance of propriety and practicality, conducted under the watchful eyes of family and neighbours. Every conversation, every shared glance, every small gesture will be noted and discussed, weighed for evidence of compatibility or signs of trouble ahead. But for now, as the sun breaks free of the eastern hills and bathes the village in golden light, you allow yourself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The first step has been taken. First, Agnes seems willing, her father approving, the practical obstacles manageable. The rest, as they say, will unfold in its own time. Chapter 2. The Dance of Courtship. 3 days pass before you see Agnes again. 3 days during which you find yourself distracted from your work, your hands going through the familiar motions of planing and joining, while your mind wanders to brown eyes and the soft sound of a woman's voice saying your name. The village, naturally, already knows. In a community where privacy is as rare as glass windows, news travels faster than smoke. By the time you return from the miller's house, your neighbour Goethe is hanging laundry with unusual enthusiasm, positioned perfectly to intercept you at your gate. Heard you've been calling on the miller's girl, she says, without preamble, her weathered hands working a sheet with unnecessary vigour. About time, I'd say. Man your age needs a wife to keep him from going peculiar. You mumble something non-committal and escape to your workshop, but the knowing looks and barely suppressed smiles follow you through the village for the rest of the week. Everyone has an opinion about the match. Agnes is a good girl, they say. Sensible, knows her way around a household. Her mother taught her well. Her father's honest, no debts to speak of. The families are well suited. Only old Margit, who's been a widow for 15 years and seems to take personal offence at other people's happiness, shakes her head and mutters about young people rushing into things they don't understand. But mostly, the village approves. Marriage is serious business in your world, affecting not just the couple involved, but the broader network of relationships that hold the community together. A good match strengthens those bonds. A bad one can create tensions that last for generations. When Sunday arrives, you find yourself paying closer attention during Mass, not to Father Benedict's sermon about the temptations of the flesh, which seems rather pointed given recent developments, but to the way Agnes sits with her family 3 rows ahead, her back straight, her hands folded in prayer. After the service, as the congregation files out toward into the weak autumn sunlight, Robert approaches you with what might charitably be called a smile. "Agnes wondered if you might join us for the midday meal," he says. Nothing elaborate, you understand. Just an opportunity for conversation. Your first formal visit. The miller's house feels different when you're an invited guest, rather than a nervous suitor. Agnes has clearly been busy. The table is set with the good wooden bowls, and there's a sense of ceremony about the way the meal has been prepared. A roasted chicken, a luxury for any household, fresh bread still warm from the oven, ale that tastes of honey and careful brewing. Agnes's mother, Margaret, proves to be a shrewd woman with a talent for steering conversation toward topics that reveal character. She asks about your family, your training as a carpenter, your opinions on everything from the quality of this year's harvest to the reliability of the local blacksmith. It's a gentle interrogation designed to uncover any hidden flaws or concerning attitudes. You do your best to answer honestly while presenting yourself in the most favourable light possible. Yes, you enjoy a cup of ale in the evening, but no, you've never been known to drink to excess. Yes, you have strong opinions about the proper way to join timber, but no, you're not so stubborn that you can't accept advice or admit when you're wrong. Agnes contributes little to the conversation, but you're beginning to recognise the intelligence in her careful attention, the way she absorbs information and files it away for later consideration. When she does speak, her comments are thoughtful, revealing a mind that thinks before it speaks. "Mother says you built the new shelving in the church vestry," she says during a lull in the conversation. "Father Benedict's been praising your work to anyone who'll listen. It's a small compliment, but it warms you more than it probably should. Pride in your work is one of the few luxuries you allow yourself, and knowing that Agnes has noticed, has perhaps even examined your craftsmanship when she thought no one was looking, suggests an attention to detail that speaks well of her character. It was a pleasure to work on," you reply. "The wood was good quality, oak from the Lord's forest. It should last for generations." "That's important," Agnes says quietly, "building things that last." The comment hangs in the air for a moment, weighted with implications that go far beyond carpentry. Building things that last, marriages, families, the patient accumulation of small successes that add up to a life worth living. After the meal, Margaret suggests that you and Agnes might take a walk around the village, properly chaperoned, of course. Her younger brother Tom, a boy of perhaps 14, is recruited for this duty, instructed to stay close enough to preserve propriety but far enough away to allow conversation. The autumn air is crisp, scented with wood smoke, and the earthy smell of leaves beginning their slow decay. Agnes walks beside you with the measured pace of someone who knows she's being observed, her hands folded in front of her, her eyes taking in the familiar sights of the village, as if seeing them for the first time. "Are you nervous?" she asks suddenly, glancing up at you with a directness that catches you off guard. The question surprises you into honesty. "Terrified," you admit. "I've never courted anyone before." Agnes nods seriously. "Neither have I. Mother's been giving me advice, but I'm not sure how helpful it is. She keeps telling me to be myself, But then she also tells me to mind my tongue and not express opinions too freely. You laugh, a short bark of amusement that draws a sharp look from young Tom. My father's advice was even less helpful. He told me to be respectful, work hard, and try not to say anything stupid. How's that working for you so far? Too early to tell, you reply, and are rewarded with a smile that transforms her entire face. It's a small moment, but it feels significant. The first crack in the formal facade of courtship, a glimpse of the person beneath the careful propriety. Agnes has a sense of humour, it seems, and perhaps a willingness to engage in the kind of honest conversation that might eventually become the foundation of something deeper. You walk the familiar circuit of the village, past the church with its new wooden bell tower, around the market square where merchants are packing up their wares after the Sunday trading, down the lane that leads to the mill pond where Agnes spent her childhood playing with her siblings. She tells you small stories about each place, how she once fell into the pond while trying to catch a frog, how she helped her father repair the mill wheel when she was 12, how she learned to read by studying the carved names on the church doorposts. The details are mundane, but they paint a picture of a childhood spent in useful work and simple pleasures, of a girl who learned early to find satisfaction in tasks completed and responsibilities met. In return, you find yourself sharing memories you hadn't planned to. The first joint you cut as an apprentice, crooked and gapped, but still treasured by your master. The morning you discovered a family of mice had made their nest in your toolbox. The satisfaction of watching someone use furniture you'd made. The knowledge that your work would outlast your own hands. By the time you circle back to the miller's house, the formal awkwardness has eased into something more natural. Not intimacy exactly, but the beginning of familiarity. When Agnes's hand brushes yours as you help her over a rough patch in the road, neither of you pulls away immediately. I've enjoyed this afternoon, she says, as you reach her gate, and there's a warmth in her voice that suggests she means it. As have I, you reply. Perhaps, might we do this again? I'd like that, Agnes says, and the simple honesty of the statement settles something anxious in your chest. As you walk home through the gathering dusk, you're aware of a subtle shift in your relationship with the village itself. You're no longer just Willem the carpenter, a single man of uncertain prospects. You're Willem who's courting the miller's daughter, a man with intentions and plans, someone investing in the future, rather than simply enduring the present. The change brings both satisfaction and responsibility. People will be watching now, noting whether you treat Agnes with proper respect, whether you prove worthy of the trust her family is placing in you. Your behaviour reflects not just on yourself, but on your family, your prospects, your place in the complex web of relationships that holds the community together. But tonight, as you bank your fire and prepare for sleep, the weight of that responsibility feels manageable. More than manageable, it feels like purpose. Agnes seems like a woman you could build something lasting with, not the passionate love of minstrel songs, perhaps, but something better suited to the realities of daily life. Partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and the quiet affection that grows between people who choose, again and again, to be kind to each other. It's a beginning. Chapter 3. The Rhythm of Seasons. October fades into November with the slow inevitability of autumn, and your courtship with Agnes settles into a rhythm as regular as the turning of the mill wheel. Sunday visits after Mass, chaperoned walks around the village, carefully supervised conversations in the miller's front room, while Margaret mends clothing and pretends not to listen to every word. You're learning the landscape of Agnes's mind as gradually as you learn the geography of your trade. The precise angle needed to cut a dovetail joint, the particular sound of oak splitting along the grain. She has strong opinions about everything, from the proper way to preserve apples through winter to the reliability of various saints when it comes to answered prayers. Her favourite is Saint Joseph, patron of carpenters, which you choose to take as a promising sign. The village watches your progress with the satisfied attention of people observing a familiar ritual. Goethe continues to position herself strategically when you pass her cottage, offering unsolicited advice about the care and feeding of wives. Old Henrik, who's been married to the same woman for 43 years, pulls you aside after church one Sunday to share wisdom that boils down to: listen when she talks, help with the heavy lifting, and never go to bed angry if you can avoid it. It's practical advice, delivered with the matter-of-fact tone of someone passing along information about crop rotation or the best time to slaughter a pig for winter meat. Your own father watches the proceedings with quiet approval, occasionally asking how things are progressing, but mostly leaving you to navigate the complexities of courtship on your own. He's begun making comments about the cottage, how it could benefit from a larger garden, how the roof might need attention before another winter, how the single room feels cramped for a man living alone, but might seem spacious enough for two people starting out together. Subtle preparations for a future that feels increasingly real. By December, the formal boundaries of courtship have relaxed enough to allow for small intimacies that would have been scandalous 3 months ago. Agnes has begun visiting your workshop, officially to bring you the midday meal her mother has prepared, but really to see your work, to understand the craft that defines so much of your daily life. She has good hands for wood, you discover. When you show her how to feel for the grain in a piece of oak, her fingers find the subtle variations in texture with surprising sensitivity. She asks intelligent questions about your tools, your techniques, the satisfaction you find in creating useful things from raw timber. "I've always wondered how you know where to make the cuts," she says, one afternoon, running her palm along the smooth surface of a table you're building for the blacksmith. It seems like magic, the way a tree becomes furniture. It's not magic, you tell her, pleased by her interest. It's patience, learning to see what the wood wants to become, then helping it get there. Agnes nods thoughtfully, like raising children perhaps, or tending a garden, working with what you have instead of trying to force what you want. The comment strikes you as unusually perceptive, and you find yourself thinking about it later as you work alone in the gathering twilight. Agnes has a way of finding deeper meanings in everyday tasks, of connecting the practical work of daily life to larger truths about how people ought to treat each other. It's a quality that suggests she might understand marriage the same way, as a craft requiring patience, attention, and the willingness to work with what you have, rather than demanding what you think you deserve. Winter deepens around the village like a gradually tightening fist. The mill wheel freezes solid for 3 weeks in January, and Robert spends his days chopping ice and cursing the ancestors who decided to build their livelihood around flowing water. Agnes helps her mother with the endless tasks that keep a household functioning through the cold months. Spinning wool, mending clothes, preserving what food they have, and stretching it to last until spring. Your own work slows during the worst of the winter, but it doesn't stop entirely. There are always repairs needed, tools to be mended, projects that can be completed by firelight in the relative warmth of your workshop. Agnes begins spending more time there, officially helping with tasks that require a second pair of hands, but really because the workshop has become a space where you can talk freely, away from the constant supervision of family and neighbours. It's during one of these quiet afternoon work sessions that the conversation turns, inevitably, to marriage. Father thinks we might make the announcement at Easter, Agnes says without looking up from the piece of leather she's helping you soften for a tool handle. He says that would give us time for proper preparation, and the timing would be appropriate. Easter, 3 months away. The timeline feels both too fast and too slow. Too fast because you're still learning the shape of Agnes's thoughts, still discovering the small habits and preferences that will matter when you're sharing daily life. Too slow because the waiting has begun to feel artificial, a formal obstacle between you and a future that already feels inevitable. How do you feel about that, you ask, trying to keep your voice neutral. Agnes is quiet for a long moment, her hands working the leather with practiced efficiency. Nervous, she says finally. Excited, terrified, ready. It's an honest answer, more honest than the conventional responses that courtship usually requires. You set down your knife and look at her directly, noting the way firelight catches in her hair, the thoughtful expression that means she's working through something complicated. What terrifies you, you ask? Another pause. Everything changing, she says. Leaving my family's house, learning to manage a household on my own. Sharing a bed with someone I'm still getting to know. She glances up at you, colour rising in her cheeks. Mother tries to prepare me, but some things you can only learn by doing. The comment hangs in the air between you, weighted with implications that make your own cheeks warm. The physical realities of marriage are something you've thought about, inevitably, but always in abstract terms. Agnes as a woman you find attractive? Yes, but also as a person whose comfort and happiness will become your responsibility. I'm nervous about that too, you admit. I want to be good to you. I want you to be happy. Agnes looks at you for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. I think you will be, she says quietly. Good to me, I mean. You're patient with your work. You listen when people talk. You don't try to make yourself seem more important than you are. It's a small catalogue of virtues, but hearing them enumerated in Agnes's voice makes you feel like perhaps you might be worthy of the trust she's placing in you. The announcement comes, as planned, on Easter Sunday. Father Benedict reads the banns from the pulpit after Mass, formally declaring your intention to marry and asking if anyone present knows of any impediment to the union. The required 3-week waiting period is more formality than genuine inquiry. Everyone in the village has been watching your courtship for months, and any serious objections would have surfaced long ago. Still, it's sobering to hear your private intentions proclaimed publicly, to see the satisfied nods and knowing smiles of neighbours who've been waiting for this moment since you first walked to the miller's gate 6 months ago. Agnes stands beside her family during the announcement, her head properly bowed but her eyes occasionally finding yours across the crowded nave. When Father Benedict finishes speaking and the congregation begins to file out, She allows herself a small smile that makes your heart perform an odd little skip. "Well then," Robert says, as the families gather outside the church, extending his hand for you to shake. "I suppose that makes it official." Your father claps you on the shoulder with the satisfied air of a man who successfully completed a complex negotiation. Margaret hugs Agnes, whispering something that makes her daughter laugh. The village surrounds you both with congratulations and advice, the kind of cheerful chaos that marks any significant transition in a small community. But through it all, you find yourself watching Agnes, noting the way she handles the attention with grace and humour, the way she includes you in conversations without making you the centre of them, the quiet dignity with which she accepts congratulations and deflects the more intrusive questions about your plans. She'll make a good wife, you think, more than good. She'll make a true partner, someone you can build a life with that's worth the building. The weeks between the announcement and the wedding pass in a blur of preparation. There are practical matters to arrange. The feast, modest but respectable. The music, local musicians who play for ale, and the promise of good food. The legal formalities that will transfer Agnes from her father's household to yours. There are also the more personal preparations. Agnes spends long hours with her mother, learning the final mysteries of housekeeping that will be her responsibility as a married woman. You work on improvements to your cottage, a larger garden plot, repairs to the roof, a proper bedstead to replace the simple straw mattress that served you as a bachelor. The bed, in particular, feels significant. You spend weeks selecting the wood, planning the joints, carving simple decorations into the headboard. It's the most personal piece of furniture you've ever made, designed not for a customer, but for your own life, for the intimacy you'll share with Agnes in the years to come. When it's finished, sturdy and smooth, and built to last generations, you find yourself standing in your cottage and trying to imagine what it will feel like to share this space with another person. How the rhythms of daily life will change when there are two sets of needs to consider. Two opinions about everything from meal planning to the proper way to bank a fire for the night. The thought is both thrilling and daunting. Like standing at the edge of a river, you know you must cross, but whose depth remains unknown. 3 days before the wedding, Agnes visits your workshop for what will be the last time as an unmarried woman. She brings ale and bread for your midday meal, but mostly she comes to see the finished bed, which you've been keeping covered with canvas like a surprise. When you pull away the cloth, revealing the clean lines and subtle decorations of your work, Agnes runs her hand along the footboard with the same careful attention she once gave to understanding the grain of oak. "It's beautiful," she says simply. "It looks like something that will last." "I hope so," you reply. "I built it to last longer than we will." Agnes nods, still examining your craftsmanship with the eye of someone who understands quality work. "Good," she says. "Our children should sleep in a bed their father made." Our children. The words send a strange shiver through your chest, partly anticipation, partly responsibility. Children are the expected outcome of marriage, the reason the church sanctions physical intimacy between husband and wife. But hearing Agnes speak of them as a certainty, as people who will exist because of decisions you're making together, makes the future feel suddenly, startlingly real. That night, lying alone in your cottage for one of the last times, you think about the conversation with Agnes, about the bed that waits in the corner like a promise, about the woman who will soon share your daily life, and nightly rest. Tomorrow, everything changes. Tomorrow, you stop being a man living alone and become part of something larger. A household, a partnership, a small unit in the complex network of relationships that holds your world together. The thought keeps you awake longer than usual, not from anxiety, but from a strange sense of anticipation, as if you're standing on the threshold of a country you've heard described but never seen, preparing to take the first step into territory that will become, with time and care, as familiar as your own hands. Chapter 4. The Wedding Day. Dawn comes grey and cold, with the promise of rain hanging in the heavy clouds that press down on the village like a benediction. You wake before first light, your stomach tight with nerves and excitement, and lie listening to the gradual stirring of the community around you, the creak of cart wheels, the lowing of cattle, the distant sound of voices beginning the day's work. Today, you marry Agnes. The thought sits strangely in your mind, simultaneously inevitable and impossible. 6 months ago, you were a man living alone, responsible only for your own comfort and survival. Tonight, you'll sleep beside a woman who will share your bed, your meals, your daily concerns, and your hopes for the future. The transformation feels both gradual and sudden, like watching a tree grow over the course of seasons, then looking up one day to discover it's become something entirely different from what it was. Your father arrives as you're attempting to make yourself presentable, carrying a wooden bucket of heated water and wearing the satisfied expression of a man whose plans are coming to fruition. Thought you might want to wash properly, he says, setting the bucket down beside your small mirror. Can't have you looking like you've been sleeping in the workshop on your wedding day. The warm water is a luxury, and you use it gratefully, scrubbing away the accumulated grime of daily work and the nervous sweat of anticipation. Your wedding clothes, the brown wool tunic and leather jerkin that represent your finest possessions, hang waiting on pegs driven into the cottage wall. As you dress, your father busies himself tidying the cottage, arranging the few pieces of furniture with the careful attention of someone preparing for an inspection. The bed you built for Agnes sits prominently in the corner, its fresh oak gleaming in the dim morning light, filtering through the oiled parchment window. She'll be pleased with your work, he says, running his hand along the smooth headboard. A man who can build furniture like this can build a marriage that lasts. It's the closest thing to sentiment your father has ever offered, and you find yourself oddly moved by the rough approval in his voice. The morning passes in a blur of final preparations. Neighbours stop by to offer congratulations and advice, their voices mixing with the sound of activity from across the village as other households prepare for the celebration. Margaret sends word that Agnes is ready, her dress pressed and her hair properly braided, her dowry chest packed with the linens and household goods that will mark her transition from daughter to wife. By mid-morning, the wedding party has assembled outside the church. It's a modest gathering, both families, a handful of close neighbours, and the village children who always appear whenever something interesting is happening. Father Benedict stands in his best robes beside the church door, the heavy wooden portal that will frame your vows. Medieval weddings don't happen inside the church. That's reserved for the mass that will follow. Instead, you exchange vows in the public space outside, where the entire community can witness the legal and social contract being formed. Agnes approaches with her family, and your breath catches in your throat. She's wearing a dress of deep blue wool, the colour of summer twilight, with her hair covered by a white linen veil that frames her face like morning mist. She's not transformed. She's still recognisably the practical woman you've come to know over months of careful courtship. But there's something about the formal ceremony, the weight of the moment, that makes her seem both familiar and mysteriously new. When she reaches your side, she looks up at you with a smile that's equal parts nervous and determined. "Ready," she whispers, so quietly that only you can hear. "Ready," you whisper back, and find that you mean it. Father Benedict begins the ceremony with a prayer in Latin, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd like incense. You understand perhaps half the words, but the cadence is familiar from countless Sunday masses, the rhythm of sacred language that marks important moments in the life of the community. Then comes the part you've been practicing in your head for weeks, the exchange of vows that will bind your life to Agnes's in the eyes of God, the Church, and the village. "Willem, son of Willem," Father Benedict intones, "do you take this woman to be your lawful wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, till death do you part?" "I do," you say, your voice carrying clearly in the cold morning air. "Agnes, daughter of Robert," the priest continues, "do you take this man to be your lawful wedded husband, to love, honour and obey, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, till death do you part?" "I do," Agnes replies, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she's promising. The ring, a simple band of silver that cost you 3 months' earnings, slips onto Agnes's finger with surprising ease, as if it were always meant to be there. Her hand is warm despite the cold air, and when she closes her fingers around yours, you feel the slight tremor that betrays her nervousness. "What God has joined together," Father Benedict declares, "let no man put asunder." And just like that, you're married. The kiss that seals the vows is chaste, appropriate for public consumption. But when Agnes's lips touch yours, you taste the promise of deeper intimacies to come. The crowd cheers, children throw handfuls of grain for luck, and someone begins playing a cheerful tune on a wooden pipe. The Mass that follows is a blur of Latin prayers and familiar hymns, the community's celebration of your union woven into the larger rhythm of worship that defines Sunday morning. You and Agnes kneel side by side at the altar rail, receiving communion as husband and wife for the first time, the shared bread and wine marking your inclusion in the community of Christian marriage. But it's the feast afterward that truly celebrates your union with the village. Tables have been set up in the churchyard, laden with food that represents genuine sacrifice from families whose resources are always stretched thin. Roasted fowl, fresh bread, ale that tastes of honey and careful brewing, the first apples of the season, baked with precious spices. You sit beside Agnes at the head table, accepting congratulations and enduring the good-natured teasing that accompanies any wedding celebration. Old Henrik regales the gathering with stories about his own wedding 43 years ago, when the ale was stronger and the winters colder. Goethe offers detailed advice about the management of husbands that makes Agnes blush and you laugh despite yourself. As the afternoon wears on and the ale flows more freely, the conversation grows franker, more pointed. Someone begins singing the traditional wedding songs that celebrate fertility and the joys of the marriage bed, their verses growing progressively more explicit as inhibitions fade. Agnes handles it all with the same grace she brings to everything else, laughing at the appropriate moments, deflecting the more intrusive questions with gentle humour, accepting the congratulations and advice with the dignity of someone who understands her role in the community's ongoing story. But you can see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands occasionally smooth her skirts or adjust her veil. She's thinking about tonight, about the moment when the public celebration ends and the private reality of marriage begins. As evening approaches and the shadows lengthen across the churchyard, the festivities gradually wind down. Families begin gathering their children and heading home. The musicians pack away their instruments and the tables are cleared of the remnants of the feast. The moment you've both been anticipating and dreading has arrived, the bedding ceremony. In some places, this ritual involves the entire wedding party escorting the bride and groom to their chamber, offering advice and encouragement while the couple is undressed and tucked into bed like children. But your village's customs are more modest, and the ceremony consists mainly of Father Benedict blessing your marriage bed and the assembled well-wishers offering final words of wisdom before departing. Still, as you and Agnes walk through the village toward your cottage, now your shared cottage, Raihu, you're acutely aware of the eyes following you, the knowing smiles and whispered comments about what will transpire once you close the door behind you. Your cottage feels different with Agnes inside it, smaller perhaps, but also more complete, as if a piece that had always been missing has finally been fitted into place. She moves around the single room with careful curiosity, examining your few possessions, the improvements you've made in preparation for her arrival, the bed that dominates one corner, like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. "It's a good space," she says finally, running her hand along the wooden table where you'll share countless meals in the years to come. It feels like a home. You've banked the fire to provide warmth without too much light, and in the gentle glow of the embers, Agnes looks both familiar and strange, still recognisably the woman you've courted for months, but transformed by the ceremony into your wife, your partner, your most intimate companion. The silence stretches between you, weighted with anticipation and uncertainty. You've talked about many things during your courtship, but never about this, the physical reality of marriage, the intimacy that will bind you together in ways both profound and utterly practical. Would you like me to? Agnes begins, then stops, colour rising in her cheeks. You realise she's asking about undressing, about the transition from public ceremony to private intimacy, and the vulnerability in her voice makes your chest tight with tenderness. "There's no hurry," you say gently. "We have all night, all our lives." Agnes nods, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. She sits on the edge of the bed you built for her, for both of you, and begins the careful process of removing her wedding finery. The blue dress, the white veil, the silver brooch that was her grandmother's, all folded away with the reverent care of someone handling treasures. You turn away to give her privacy, busying yourself with unnecessary tasks, checking the door latch, adjusting the fire, trying not to think about the soft rustle of fabric behind you or the fact that your wife is preparing for bed just a few feet away. When you finally turn around, Agnes is sitting in her linen shift, her hair unbraided and falling around her shoulders like a brown silk curtain. She looks young and vulnerable and beautiful in the firelight, and you feel the weight of responsibility settle around you like a cloak. This woman has trusted you with her future, her body, her happiness. Everything that happens between you from this moment forward will shape the rest of both your lives. Agnes, you say softly, approaching the bed with the careful movements of someone approaching a wild animal that might flee. That is, how do you feel? She looks up at you with eyes that reflect both nervousness and determination. Like I'm about to step off a cliff, she says honestly. But I think it might be worth the fall. You sit beside her on the bed, close enough to feel the warmth of her body through the thin linen of her shift. When you reach for her hand, she doesn't pull away, and her fingers intertwine with yours as naturally as if you'd been holding hands for years instead of months. I want you to know, you say, the words coming slowly, as you try to find the right way to express something you've never had to put into language before, that I'll try to be gentle. I'll try to make this good for you. Agnes nods, her eyes never leaving your face. I know, she says simply. I trust you. The kiss that follows is different from the chaste peck that sealed your wedding vows. It's deeper, more exploratory, flavoured with the ale from the wedding feast and the promise of discoveries yet to be made. Agnes responds tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as you take your time, letting the kiss build naturally rather than rushing toward its inevitable conclusion. When you finally part, both of you are breathing more quickly, and there's a new awareness in the air between you. The recognition that you're no longer bound by the careful restrictions of courtship, that everything you've wondered about during the long months of supervised visits and chaperoned walks is now not just permitted, but expected. What follows unfolds with the careful tenderness of two people learning a new language together. Agnes is shy but not fearful, curious despite her inexperience. You do your best to be patient, to follow her lead, to pay attention to the subtle cues that tell you when to advance and when to pause. There's awkwardness, inevitably, fumbling with unfamiliar fastenings, uncertain positioning, the brief sharp pain that makes Agnes gasp and grip your shoulders. But there's also wonder, the gradual discovery of how two bodies can fit together, how pleasure can build and transform and create a connection deeper than words. Afterward, you lie beside each other in the darkness, Agnes's head resting on your shoulder, her breathing gradually returning to normal. The cottage feels different now, truly yours in a way it never was when you lived here alone. The bed you built has been christened, your marriage consummated, your union made complete in the eyes of God and the community. Are you all right? You ask softly, your hand stroking the silk of her unbound hair. Agnes nods against your shoulder. More than all right, she murmurs. I was so worried it would be unpleasant, but it wasn't. It was... She trails off, searching for words to describe something that has no adequate language in your world, where discussions of physical pleasure are relegated to whispers and carefully coded conversations. Good, you suggest. Good, she agrees, and you can hear the smile in her voice. Very good. Outside, the village sleeps, unaware of the small miracle that has just taken place in your cottage. Two strangers learning to become family. Two bodies discovering how to move together. Two hearts beginning the long, patient work of growing into love. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges and discoveries. You'll wake as husband and wife, with all the practical realities that entails, shared meals and common concerns, the negotiation of daily life when privacy is scarce and every decision affects two people instead of one. But tonight, in the warm darkness of your marriage bed, those concerns feel distant and manageable. Tonight, Agnes sleeps beside you with the easy breathing of someone who has found her place in the world, and you lie awake just long enough to marvel at the fact that you are no longer alone. Chapter 5. The First Morning. You wake before dawn, as you always do, but this morning brings the startling warmth of another body beside you in the bed. For a moment, in the confused space between sleep and wakefulness, you forget where you are, why there's someone sharing your mattress, why the familiar geography of your cottage feels subtly different. Then memory returns with a gentle crash of recognition. Agnes, your wife, the woman who sleeps curled against your side with one hand resting on your chest, her breathing soft and regular in the pre-dawn darkness. Marriage. The word sits differently in your mind now, weighted with actual experience rather than abstract anticipation. You are no longer a man planning to be married. You are a married man, with all the profound mundane reality that entails. Agnes stirs as pale light begins to filter through the oiled parchment window, her eyes opening to meet yours with a moment of confusion that mirrors your own awakening. Then recognition dawns, followed by a shy smile that transforms her sleep-warmed face. "Good morning, husband," she says softly, testing the word like a key in an unfamiliar lock. "Good morning, wife," you reply, and the simple exchange feels like a small ritual, a way of acknowledging the new landscape you're both learning to navigate. The cottage is cold, the fire burned low during the night, and autumn mornings carry the sharp edge of winter's approach. But beneath the worn wool blankets, with Agnes's warmth pressed against your side, the chill feels manageable rather than bitter. "I should tend the fire," you say, though you make no immediate move to leave the bed's warmth. "In a moment," Agnes murmurs, her hand moving slightly on your chest. "It's so peaceful like this." And it is peaceful in a way that surprises you. You'd expected the first morning of marriage to feel dramatic, transformed by the intimacies of the wedding night. Instead, it feels remarkably natural, as if Agnes has always been part of your morning routine, as if waking beside another person is something you've done for years rather than hours. Eventually, practical necessity wins over comfort. The fire needs tending. Water must be drawn from the well. The day's work cannot wait for newlyweds to finish marvelling at their changed circumstances. You slip from the bed's warmth and dress quickly, in the cold air, pulling on the same rough wool tunic and leather jerkin that you wore yesterday, before your life was divided into before marriage and after. Agnes rises more slowly, her movements careful, as she adjusts to the subtle changes that marriage has brought to her body. She dresses in the practical brown wool dress she wore for everyday tasks during your courtship, but there's something different about the way she moves through the cottage. Not like a visitor assessing unfamiliar territory, but like someone taking possession of a space that now belongs to her. "What would you like for breakfast?" she asks, examining the contents of your small pantry with the critical eye of someone planning a meal from limited resources. The question catches you off guard. For 6 years since your mother's death, you've eaten whatever you could prepare yourself. Bread and ale, porridge, the occasional egg when your hens were feeling generous. The idea of someone else planning your meals, considering your preferences, caring whether you're properly fed, feels both luxurious and overwhelming. "Whatever you think best," you say, and Agnes nods with the satisfaction of someone who's just been handed a familiar responsibility. As she moves around the cottage, preparing oat porridge and slicing yesterday's bread, you find yourself studying her with the intensity of someone trying to memorize a new language. The way she tests the porridge with a wooden spoon before declaring it ready. How she arranges the simple meal on wooden bowls with care that transforms basic sustenance into something approaching ceremony. The unconscious efficiency with which she organizes your few possessions into a system that makes sense to her. This is what marriage looks like, you realize. Not the dramatic passions of minstrel songs, but the quiet negotiation of daily life, the gradual merger of two sets of habits and preferences into something that works for both people. The porridge needs salt, Agnes says, tasting it with a slight frown, and perhaps some honey, if we can spare it. You fetch both from your small stores, watching as she adjusts the flavour with the confidence of someone who learned cooking at her mother's side. The result is better than anything you've managed to prepare yourself. Not because the ingredients are different, but because someone cared enough to make it taste good rather than simply eatable. Over breakfast, you discuss the practical arrangements that will shape your daily life together. Agnes will take over most of the cooking and household management, freeing you to focus on your carpentry work. She'll tend the small garden behind the cottage, manage relations with neighbours, and handle the social obligations that come with being part of a married couple in the village. In return, you'll provide for her material needs, protect her from physical threats, and include her in decisions that affect the household's welfare. It's a division of labour as old as marriage itself, refined by countless generations into an arrangement that, if not perfectly equal, at least distributes burdens and responsibilities in ways that benefit both partners. "I'd like to visit Mother this afternoon," Agnes says, as she clears away the breakfast bowls. "She'll want to know that that we're settling in well." The careful phrasing tells you that Margaret will want confirmation that the wedding night proceeded without incident, that her daughter has successfully made the transition from maiden to wife without trauma or disappointment. It's the kind of intimate conversation that would have embarrassed you yesterday, but which now feels like part of the complex web of relationships you've joined by marrying into Agnes's family. "Of course," you say. "I'll walk with you after I finish the work I promised the blacksmith." The morning passes in the familiar rhythm of labour, your hands moving through practiced motions while your mind processes the changes that marriage has brought to your daily routine. The work itself is unchanged, but there's someone to consider now when you decide how long to labour, when to break for a meal, whether to accept a commission that would require working late into the evening. Agnes spends the mornings settling into the cottage's rhythms, learning the particular quirks of your cooking fire, the best places to store different household goods, the way morning light moves across the single room that now serves as bedroom, kitchen, and living space for both of you. When you break for the midday meal, she presents you with bread, cheese, and ale, arranged with the same careful attention she brought to breakfast. But there's something more comfortable about the way she moves now, less like a guest and more like someone who belongs here. "The cottage is well built," she says, settling beside you at the wooden table, warm despite the size. "You chose the location well, close enough to the village for convenience, far enough away for privacy." Privacy, the word carries new meaning now that you're sharing the space with someone else. Privacy will be something you negotiate together rather than something you simply possess by virtue of living alone. After the meal, you walk together to Agnes's family home, your first public appearance as a married couple. The village notices, of course. Neighbours find reasons to be outside their cottages as you pass, offering congratulations and studying Agnes for signs of how married life suits her. Goethe stops you at her gate to inquire about Agnes's health with the pointed interest of someone fishing for details about your wedding night. Margaret greets you both with the satisfied air of a woman whose plans have come to fruition, serving tea and honey cakes while asking carefully neutral questions that somehow manage to confirm what she needs to know without breaching propriety. "You look well, daughter," she says to Agnes, and the simple words carry volumes of meaning about successful transitions and proper behaviour. "I am well, mother," Agnes replies with equal care. "Very well indeed." The conversation that follows covers practical matters, household management, the approaching winter, your plans for expanding your trade. But underneath runs the current of family relationships, adjusting to include a new member. You are no longer just Willem the carpenter. You are Agnes's husband, Margaret's son-in-law, a man with obligations and connections that extend beyond your own immediate concerns. As afternoon fades toward evening, you walk home through the village in comfortable silence. Agnes's hand finds yours as you navigate the rough path, and the simple contact feels natural rather than staged. The unconscious intimacy of two people learning to move through the world together. "Are you happy?" you ask as you reach your cottage, your shared cottage, and pause at the wooden gate. Agnes considers the question seriously, as she considers most things. "I think so," she says finally. "It's different from what I expected. Less dramatic, more comfortable." Is that the right word? You understand what she means. The passionate love celebrated in songs and stories feels too intense, too unsustainable for daily life. What you're building together feels quieter, but more durable. Affection based on compatibility and consideration rather than desperate longing. "I think comfortable might be exactly right," you tell her, and she smiles with the satisfaction of someone who's found the words for something important. That evening, as you prepare for your second night as a married couple, the awkwardness of the previous evening has faded into something easier, more natural. Agnes moves around the cottage with growing confidence, banking the fire for the night, setting out clothes for tomorrow, completing the small rituals that mark the end of one day and preparation for the next. When she joins you in the bed you built for both of you, there's none of yesterday's nervousness, only the quiet anticipation of two people who've discovered that physical intimacy can be both profound and surprisingly straightforward. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Agnes warm and relaxed beside you, you think about the word she used earlier, comfortable. It's not the adjective poets used to describe love, but it might be the most important quality a marriage can possess. The ability to be at ease with another person, to feel at home in their presence, to find satisfaction in the ordinary moments that make up most of life. Tomorrow will bring new challenges as you continue learning to live as a partnership rather than individuals. There will be disagreements to navigate, differences of opinion to negotiate, the countless small adjustments required when two people merge their separate lives into something shared. But tonight, as Agnes's breathing deepens into sleep and the cottage settles around you both, those future challenges feel manageable. You have found against all your fears, and in spite of all obstacles, someone you can be comfortable with, someone who makes the work of daily life feel lighter rather than heavier. It's not the beginning of a fairy tale, but it might be something better. The beginning of a real partnership, built on mutual respect and growing affection, designed to last through whatever challenges the future might bring. Outside, the village sleeps, unaware that in one small cottage, two people are learning that love doesn't always announce itself with thunderclaps and lightning. Sometimes it arrives quietly, wearing work clothes and carrying practical gifts, content to grow slowly in the spaces between shared meals and common concerns. Sometimes that's exactly what you need. Chapter 6. The Seasons Turn. By the feast of St. Andrew, 2 months after your wedding, the routines of married life have settled around you and Agnes, like a well-fitted garment. The cottage that once echoed with the solitary sounds of a bachelor's existence now hums with the quiet efficiency of two people who've learned to coordinate their movements, to anticipate each other's needs, to create harmony from the potential chaos of shared space. The first snow falls on a Tuesday morning in late November, and you wake to find Agnes already up, standing at the small window and watching the white flakes drift down like blessings or warnings, depending on your perspective. "It's beautiful," she says softly, her breath fogging the cold air near the glass. "But it means a long winter ahead." You join her at the window, your body warming her back as you watch the village transform under its white blanket. The familiar landscape of thatched roofs and narrow lanes takes on a fairy tale quality in the early morning light. But beneath the beauty lies the harsh reality of winter in your world. Months of cold, scarcity, and the constant challenge of staying warm and fed until spring returns. "We're prepared," you tell her. And it's true. Your stores of grain and preserved meat should last until Easter. The cottage is snug and well built, and your trade provides enough income to purchase necessities when your own supplies run low. But preparation is one thing, endurance is another. Winter tests marriages as severely as it tests everything else, confining couples to small spaces, limiting opportunities for privacy and individual pursuits, creating the kind of prolonged intimacy that either strengthens bonds or reveals their weaknesses. Agnes turns in your arms, her face serious in the grey morning light. "I've been thinking," she says, "about spring, about children." The word hangs in the air between you, weighted with implications and possibilities you've both been aware of, but haven't discussed directly. Children are the expected outcome of marriage, the reason the church sanctions physical intimacy between husband and wife. But there are also people who will exist because of decisions you make together, small humans who will depend on you for everything from basic survival to moral guidance. "And?" you prompt gently. "I think I'd like to wait a year or two," Agnes says carefully, "to make sure we're established, that we understand each other well enough to raise children together." It's a practical approach, and one that shows the thoughtfulness you've come to associate with Agnes's decision-making. Too many couples in your village struggle with pregnancies that come too soon before they've learned to manage their own relationship, let alone guide someone else's development. "I think that's wise," you tell her, and mean it. "When we do have children, I want us to be ready for them." Agnes nods, some tension leaving her shoulders. It's another small negotiation in the ongoing process of building a marriage, another moment when you've demonstrated that her thoughts and concerns matter to you. The winter deepens around your cottage, like a slowly tightening hand, Snow piles against the walls, the small garden disappears under white drifts, and the path to the village becomes a treacherous obstacle course of ice and hidden stones. Your work slows but doesn't stop entirely. There are always repairs needed, tools to be mended, small projects that can be completed by firelight. Agnes adapts to the enforced intimacy of winter with the same practical grace she brings to everything else. She develops systems for managing the limited space, schedules that ensure you're not always underfoot with each other, quiet activities that can be pursued independently, even when you're sharing the same small room. She spins wool by the fire while you work on delicate carving projects. She mends clothes while you study the grain patterns in wood, planning future projects. She reads aloud from the few books you own, mostly religious texts borrowed from Father Benedict, while you listen and work with your hands. The physical intimacy between you continues to develop as well, growing more natural and satisfying as you both become more comfortable with each other's bodies and responses. What began as duty and curiosity has evolved into genuine pleasure, moments of connection that bind you together in ways that go beyond words or rational thought. You discover that Agnes has a playful side that emerges only in the privacy of your shared bed, a willingness to explore an experiment that surprises and delights you. She learns that you have a tenderness that extends beyond your careful hands, an emotional generosity that makes her feel cherished rather than simply desired. But it's not just the dramatic moments that strengthen your bond. It's the accumulated weight of small kindnesses, daily considerations, the countless ways you choose to be gentle with each other, even when circumstances make gentleness difficult. When Agnes falls ill with a fever that keeps her bedridden for a week, you tend her with the same careful attention you bring to your woodworking. You prepare broths from your precious stores of preserved vegetables. Keep the fire burning high enough to combat her chills. Sit beside the bed and read to her when she's too weak to sleep but too sick to be alone. When your best chisel breaks just before you're supposed to complete a commission for the Lord Steward, Agnes walks through the snow to the blacksmith's forge, negotiating for priority repair work with a combination of charm and determination that ensures you meet your deadline. These aren't the grand gestures celebrated in ballads and romances, but they're the foundation of something more durable than passion. A partnership built on reliability, consideration, and the day-to-day choice to put each other's welfare ahead of your own convenience. By Candlemas, when the first hints of spring begin to show in the gradually lengthening days, you realise that something fundamental has shifted in your relationship with Agnes. She's no longer the practical stranger you married for sensible reasons. She's become someone you genuinely care about, someone whose happiness matters to you for its own sake, rather than simply as a component of household harmony. You're not sure when the transition happened. There was no moment of revelation, no dramatic declaration of feelings. Instead, affection grew gradually, like a tree putting down roots, until one day you looked up and realised it had become substantial enough to weather any storm. Agnes seems to have undergone a similar transformation. The careful politeness of early marriage has given way to easy familiarity, the kind of casual intimacy that comes from truly knowing another person. She teases you about your tendency to hum while you work, and you mock her habit of rearranging household items when she's thinking through a problem. It's comfortable, but it's also something more than comfortable. It's the beginning of love, Not the lightning strike passion of troubadour songs, but the steady flame that can burn for decades without consuming what it illuminates. Spring arrives gradually, as it always does, with muddy ground and tentative green shoots, and the gradual warming of air that's been knife-sharp for months. The cottage feels different as the weather improves, larger somehow, as if winter's enforced confinement has made you both more appreciative of space and movement, and the ability to step outside without planning it like a military campaign. Your work picks up as the village emerges from winter's hibernation. There are commissions waiting, repairs needed after months of cold weather, new projects inspired by winter planning and spring optimism. Agnes begins planting the cottage garden, her hands gentle with seeds and seedlings, her face bright with the satisfaction of someone who understands the patience required to nurture growth. One evening in early March, as you're working by lamplight on a particularly complex joint, Agnes sets down her spinning and looks at you with an expression you've learned to recognise. The thoughtful focus that means she's working through something important. I've been thinking about what we discussed in the winter, she says carefully, about children. You set down your tools and give her your full attention. And I think, she pauses, choosing her words with characteristic care, I think we're ready now. Or ready enough. We understand each other. We work well together, and the household is stable. There's something else in her voice, something beyond practical considerations, and you think you recognise it as desire. Not just the physical urge that drives procreation, but the genuine want to create a family with you, to see what kind of people you might raise together. I think so too, you tell her, and watch relief and anticipation chase each other across her face. That night, your intimacy carries a different quality, purposeful rather than simply pleasurable, weighted with the possibility of consequences that extend far beyond the moment. When you hold Agnes afterward, her head resting on your shoulder, in the position that's become natural for both of you, you find yourself thinking about the children who might result from this decision. The small people who will learn about love and work and responsibility by watching how you and Agnes treat each other. It's a sobering thought, but not a frightening one. You've built something solid together, something that can serve as a foundation for the more complex structure of family life. Outside, spring continues its patient work of renewal, and inside your cottage, two people who began as strangers prepare to become something more than just husband and wife. You're becoming the kind of partnership that can create and nurture new life, that can serve as a model for the children who will, God willing, carry your combined legacy into the future. The transformation isn't complete. Love continues to deepen, and there will always be new challenges to navigate, new aspects of each other to discover. But tonight, as Agnes sleeps peacefully beside you, and the cottage settles around you, both like a benediction, you know that you've succeeded in building something worthwhile. Not a fairy tale, but something better. A real marriage, based on mutual respect and growing affection, strong enough to support whatever the future might bring. Chapter 7. 3 years. Hence, the morning light falls differently now through the cottage window, softened by the small hands that have smeared it with fingerprints, and the breath of a child who likes to watch for his father's return from the workshop, little Willem. Though Agnes insists on calling him Will to avoid confusion, sits on the wooden stool you built for him, his 3-year-old legs swinging as he watches the lane that leads to the village. Papa working? He asks Agnes, for the dozenth time this morning. His vocabulary still small, but his curiosity enormous. Papa's working, Agnes confirms patiently, her hands busy with the bread dough that will become the evening meal. He'll be home when the church bells ring for vespers. The cottage has evolved to accommodate its newest resident. There's a small trundle bed tucked under your own, toys carved from wood, scraps scattered in corners. The particular organised chaos that comes from trying to maintain order while raising a toddler who views every household object as a potential adventure. Agnes moves around the space with the efficient grace of someone who's learned to accomplish necessary tasks while keeping one eye on a mobile child. She's changed over the 3 years of your marriage, not just physically, though her body bears the soft evidence of pregnancy and childbirth, but in the deeper ways that come from growing into a role that fits perfectly. She's become the heart of your small household, the person who remembers when supplies are running low, who maintains relationships with neighbours and family, who somehow manages to keep everyone fed, clothed, and reasonably clean, despite limited resources and unlimited challenges. You're different too, you know. The solitary carpenter who married for practical reasons has become a family man, someone whose decisions are always filtered through consideration of how they'll affect the people who depend on him. Your work has expanded to keep pace with your responsibilities, more commissions, longer hours, the constant balancing act of providing for a family while still spending time with them. But it's good work, satisfying in ways that your bachelor existence never was. Every carefully crafted joint, every smooth surface, every piece of furniture that will outlast your own hands feels like a legacy you're building for Will, for the other children you and Agnes hope to have, for the generations who will use what you've made long after your name is forgotten. The rhythm of family life has its own music now. The soft conversations between husband and wife after the child is asleep. The laughter that echoes from the cottage when Will discovers something new and delightful. The comfortable silences that come from sharing space with people who understand you completely. Agnes is pregnant again, though she hasn't told you yet. You know because you've learned to read the subtle signs. The way she moves more carefully in the morning, the particular flush that colours her cheeks, the unconscious way her hand sometimes rests on her still flat belly. She'll tell you when she's ready, when she's sure, and you'll receive the news with the same quiet joy that has marked all the significant moments of your marriage. Tonight, when you return from your workshop with sawdust in your hair and the satisfaction of another day's honest work, you'll find Agnes stirring something fragrant over the fire while Will helps by dropping wooden blocks into a pot with the serious concentration of someone performing important work. You'll wash your hands in the basin by the door, kiss your wife hello in the way that has become as natural as breathing, and swing your son up into arms that have grown strong from years of working with wood, and gentle from years of holding the people you love. Over the simple meal that Agnes has prepared, bread and stew and ale that tastes of home and contentment, you'll talk about the day's small events. Will's attempts to help in the garden, the neighbour's cow that got loose again, your progress on the chest you're building for the merchant's daughter who's planning to marry in the spring. It's ordinary conversation, the kind that fills countless evenings in countless households, but it's also the fabric from which real lives are woven. Not the dramatic loves and tragic losses of minstrel songs, but the steady accumulation of shared days, common concerns, small joys acknowledged and celebrated. After Will is tucked into his small bed, with a story about brave carpenters and beautiful millers' daughters, you and Agnes will sit by the fire and plan tomorrow's tasks, next week's expenses, the improvements you want to make to the cottage before winter returns. And later, in the bed you built for both of you, you'll hold your wife close and marvel at the distance you've travelled from that nervous morning 3 years ago when you walked to Robert's door to ask for his daughter's hand. You were strangers then, brought together by practical necessity and community expectation. Now you're partners in the deepest sense, two people who've learned to move through the world as a unit, who've discovered that love doesn't always announce itself with trumpets and declarations, but sometimes arrives quietly, wearing work clothes and carrying practical gifts. The medieval world is harsh in countless ways. Life is short, resources are scarce, and the future is always uncertain. Privacy is rare, comfort is limited, and passion must always be balanced against survival and social expectations. But within those constraints, you found something precious, a partnership that makes the burdens lighter and the joys more meaningful, a marriage